And having said all of this, I want to ask you a question. How to become a happy and a lively Chinese? And this time, I want to present to you some of my empirical findings and my critical reflections and recommendations. First, what do you think the essential characteristics are for being an ideal Chinese and a creative Chinese, and to what extent there would be similar or overlap? Think about this question. Around this, I did a study many years ago. We examined the compatibility between the creative personality and the Chinese personality. We used a Likert scale checklist of 60 adjectives consisting of a trace of the creative, the Chinese, and the Western personalities to 451 Chinese undergraduates from Beijing, Guangzhou, Hong Kong, and Taipei. And the traits of the creative and Chinese personalities were perceived as distinctive by all samples. So the conclusion is, the characteristics for an ideal Chinese and a creative Chinese did not overlap much at all. And you can see this is the graph or the figure that shows the difference. You see the solid line on the top is the personal creative Chinese, and the dotted line next to it is the ideal Chinese line. And you can see they really overlap. And you can see the key components for being creative do not overlap the key components or traits for creativity. The words include creative, having original ideas, innovative, observant, good thinking, willing to try, flexible, wisdom, self-confident, imaginative, curious, changeable, individualistic, research of things. In fact, of these 12 words, only 2 words overlap. One is wisdom, the other is imaginative. You know what it means? To become a creative Chinese is not compatible to being an ideal Chinese. What should we do? That's the recommendation. The recommendation is to become a creative Chinese should equal to being an ideal Chinese. The traits for both should converge and overlap as much as possible. Chinese people should learn to be more imaginative, more appreciative of diversity and originality, novelty, and be more willing to try. In such a way, a Chinese person will become more witty, imaginative, and aspire for everyday creativity. Now, this is the first recommendation I have from my findings for being ideal Chinese. Next question I want to ask you is how important humor is to Chinese people compared with the Westerners. We all know we Chinese have an ambivalent attitude towards humor. On one hand, we appreciate it. On the other hand, we sort of despise it. And this is not healthy or not good for us to present ourselves as a cheerful person, as a witty person, because humor, particularly good humor, positive humor, would present you as a cheerful and witty person, and that will add to your personal charisma. And I did study about 10 years ago, and it's the different attitudes towards humor between Chinese American students. And we used what is called the implicit association test, IAT, to compare Chinese American attitudes towards humor. The 60 Chinese undergrad students showed significant difference from the 33 American exchange students in associating humor more frequently with unpleasant adjectives and seriousness than with pleasant adjectives on IAT. The opposite pattern was found for the American group. And what does it mean? Well, the Chinese subjects compared to American subjects held a more negative implicit attitude towards humor. And moreover, both Chinese American students believe that Americans were more humorous than the Chinese. And explicitly, Chinese students appreciated humor almost the same as American students, but implicitly, they tended to devalue humor. So this is the ambivalent attitudes which I talked. And there are some other similar findings. If you look at this time it's not Americans and Chinese, the Canadians and Chinese. We found that the Canadian students scored higher on importance of humor, rating of self-humor, humor production, humor appreciation, coping humor than the Chinese students. So they overwhelmingly appreciate humor and use humor more than we do. And that's really what we should be aware and should attend more. And also ask these people to nominate the best humors they can think of. And you can see here, this bar chart. If you look at a blue bar, that's the comedians. And if you look at a red bar, that's the family members. You can see Chinese people nominate significantly more comedians and actors and actresses as iconic figures of humor than the Canadian samples, whereas the Canadian sample nominated significantly more family members as representatives or iconic figures of humor. So for the Chinese, when you think about the humorists, you immediately think about the comedians. For the Canadians, you think about their family members, their friends. You know what that means? That means we have an extraordinary view of humorists. We should have, like Canadians, an honorary view of humorists. That means everybody can become humorous. Humor is not a gift to comedians only. So here comes the recommendation. Becoming humorous Chinese is important to becoming a happy Chinese, for which Chinese people should try to be more appreciative of witty jokes and identify with and emulate the humorous people around and be more willing to try. And Chinese people should regard humor as a talent to everyone rather than a gift to the comedians only. And in such a way, a Chinese person will become more witty, more lively, and be more appreciative of humor and diversity in everyday life. And here is another study which I did. It's about different humor styles and mental health. The symptom checklist 90 on these aspects you can see. First of all, I need to tell you that not all humor is good. Humor has been classified as a positive humor and negative humor, adaptive humor and maladaptive humor. The positive and adaptive humor includes affective humor, that means telling jokes to delight others, and a self-enhancing humor, meaning humor to cheer up oneself. That's the adaptive or positive humor. The negative humor includes the aggressive humor, means to use humor to put down, to make fun of others, and a self-defeating humor means to use humor to defeat oneself. And you can see this affiliative and self-enhanced humor has been all negatively associated with the symptoms of poor mental health, whereas aggressive and self-defeating humor has been positive correlated with all of the items. So the conclusion is, the more people use affiliative and self-enhancing humor, the less likely the people will experience depression, anxiety, hostility, compulsion, and interpersonal sensitivity and psychoticism. In addition, the more people use aggressive humor and self-defeating humor, the more likely people will experience depression, anxiety, hostility, compulsion, interpersonal sensitivity, and psychoticism. So, humor styles matter. People should try to develop and use more adaptive, positive humors rather than maladaptive and negative humor. So the recommendation 3 is humor matter. people should try to develop and use more adaptive humor and use less maladaptive humor in everyday social interaction. And here is another line of study which is about humor and playfulness. And we can see that playfulness via the effect of positive humor would enhance, would try to reduce depression, whereas aggressive and self-defeating humor would increase depression. And you can see if you are a fun-seeking person, you are much less likely to experience depression, anxiety, compulsion, phobia, hostility, paranoia, sensitivity, psychosis, and somatization, and the others. So the recommendation 4 is playfulness can promote fun-seeking, and it plays an important role in enhancing mental health, particularly for youngsters. Okay, while adaptive humor styles enhance playfulness and substitute with happiness, maladaptive humor does the opposite. So people should seek fun and pleasure by telling friendly jokes rather than ridiculing others. Having said all of this, I want to recommend the Pentagon model of happiness for the Chinese. And this includes what is called 人福、和福、敬福、乐福、完福. Add up, we call it 幸福. Of course, you don't know the Chinese, and here is the English translation. This is the mercifulness, includes kindness, love, open-mindedness. There is the peacefulness, forgiveness, social intelligence, and so on. There is the respectfulness, the citizenship, gratitude, modesty. There was the cheerfulness, humor, hope, optimism, and there was the playfulness, creativity, curiosity, vitality. All of these are desirable personality traits for a modern Chinese, for an ideal Chinese. I hope you'll keep this in mind. Finally, I want to conclude this lecture by citing a poem from Qu Yuan, the great patriot in the warring period in Chinese history. And here is the poem I think most of Chinese will know. Okay? 常态兮以眼济兮，爱民生之多见。路漫漫其修远兮，吾将上下而求索。And here is my translation. Often cry as I sigh, for to live is so tired. Far as the road lies ahead, I will always search for why. And for understanding we Chinese, we should always search for why, and particularly how to help the Chinese lead a happier and more lively life. We need to continue to study, not just to describe, but also to prescribe desirable personality traits for the Chinese. And here are some of the English publications I have. If you care, you can read my books. Those are the collection of my studies. And having said all of this, thank you for attending this lecture.